Greetings to all of you Fire Emblem fans. This is Don1 and Mekkah.
Hey.
And we have another doubleheader for you. This is chapters 22 and 23 of my Fire Emblem 5 Paragon Mode 0% Girls playthrough.
Chapter 22 is the Great Bridge chapter, where we meet Saias. We meet him for the first time because the last time he would have appeared, we warp skipped the chapter before he could get there, but this time he's there from the start. And he provides a bit of a challenge when it comes to boss killing, because Saias grants 10 leadership stars to all enemy units, and then there's 9 other leadership stars present, so that makes for a total of 19 leadership stars. So even if we were to warp Asphalt to the boss and attack, he would still face very bad hit rates. And you make it even worse because you just rescued Asphalt, so we're gonna have to use the even more inaccurate Dean to get him.
Yeah, clearly I was on drugs here or something, because I decided to rescue our best boss killer with Xavier, and now I'm warping some guy who's not even that great at killing bosses. So the strategy that I'm using here is totally pacifist. It does not involve killing the boss at all. It's actually kind of cheesy. Recall way back when I explained the capture mechanics and how the game classifies enemies as being defenseless or being not defenseless. In this case, the boss starts out with a Master Lance in his inventory. He doesn't have it equipped, but just having it makes the game think that he can still defend against you. So in order to capture him, we had to steal his Master Lance first with Tina, and afterwards he only has a Blizzard Tome, so we can just pick him up with Dean and fly away. And afterwards just warp Leif, and essentially bypass all the leadership stars, because the Thief Staff is not subject to any accuracy modifications that way. So the other two things that I want to point out on this map, we warped Mareeta to the bottom right hand corner house so that she can pick up a rescue staff. That's really important. There's actually also a warp staff in another house over in the bottom left hand corner, which we skipped because we don't need any more warp uses. And we actually didn't deploy enough warp users anyway because some of them are resting. And finally, you might have noticed that Leif took an item from the enemy boss. That's a Blizzard Tome. It's a very important tome, and you'll see why it's important in the next chapter. So that's chapter 22 finished in one turn. And we've already started on chapter 23. That was fast.
So I hope you guys liked Saias, because he's going to appear again in this chapter, and this time he's going to be on our side. That's great. Seems like a good boon for our team because he has 8 staffs and leadership. Not as much leadership as he used to have. Previous chapter he had 10, and right now he only has 5 left. And after this chapter he's only going to have 3, but still pretty good unit. Unfortunately, he faces competition from another unit who joins in this chapter, Zed, the wind hero that we already knew. And only one of them can join your team, that's the whole problem. And Zed also has A staffs, and while Saias' combat is decent, Zed's is absolutely broken. He will run round KO pretty much any enemy with the Forseti Tome because it gives plus 20 skill and plus 20 speed, and having ridiculous might. So for most players the choice is pretty clear between the two that you want. Which of the two you want, and I think Don is no exception.
That's right. So this is a binary choice, but it's not like in Fates where you have to decide between Hoshido or Nor. It's not like a menu that you decide. It's kind of a more gameplay-oriented decision. So if you never recruit Zed, then Saias stays. If you somehow get Zed to appear and then recruit him, then you get both on the team for this chapter, but Saias leaves afterwards. So in order to get Zed, we have to do 2 things. First is to actually get him to appear. In order to do that, you have to end your turn sufficiently close in an area that's near the gate. We did that with Saias in turn 1 by just moving him 1 turn downwards and then rescuing him out of harm's way. And afterwards, Zed appears and murders the enemy boss. He one-shots him with the Forseti critical. Because he's an NPC, we have to talk to him with Leif. He will also end up facing a whole legion of enemy cavalry, but because of the giant avoid bonus that he's getting from the gate and from the Forseti Tome, they're pretty much never going to hit him.
Unfortunately, this is going to take quite a while to go through because the annoying Forseti animation, as awesome as it is, you don't really want to see it 16 times, but that's what happens when he never crits ever, even though he has a 25% chance to do that every first hit. Now, the thing about Zed is he actually costs a turn to recruit because he will only appear after your turn is already over, even if you enter his trigger zone on turn 1. Whereas Saias, he will just join you from turn 1 onwards. So if you wanted to just kill the boss on turn 1 and warp skip, you could do that and keep Saias. And it's not that bad in a growth playthrough, because most of the things that Zed ends up doing for Don, you could replicate with, say, Sarah if she leveled up plenty enough, like she had cap magic and speed, it's just fine. But Donna really needs Zed's power to get through the rest of the game.
So while we're waiting for Zed to finish wiping the floor with this enemy cavalry unit, I want to talk about something that's really not obvious at first glance. Remember back in chapter 18, I talked about how we manipulated our deployment order for the 3 chapters before that, so that we can get the optimal configuration in chapter 18. The army was split into 2 groups, one on the left and one on the right. Well, that's also true for the next upcoming 3 chapters in a row. In chapter 24, you're split into groups, into 3 groups. Chapter 24X, 2 groups, and then final chapter, 6 different groups. So it's very difficult to get a deployment order that works for all of these 3 chapters, especially since you can't adjust anything in between. Starting in chapter 21, we were already deploying useless units just to slot units into the right deployment slots. And on top of that, we also had to manage our fatigue because we were using our staff uses pretty liberally. And even though we bought a lot of stamina drinks, we don't have enough to just like completely disregard their fatigue. So we also had to take that into consideration. For most of you guys that have not played a old Fire Emblem game that doesn't have the formation option, you guys will take it for granted, but trust me, it was a lot of work getting the formation right.
Yeah, and if you don't do it, it's actually pretty punishing. I did an FE5 draft a while ago, and in the final chapter, because I didn't really pay attention to deployment, it really sucked because I had to rely on the RNG a lot more to make things right. Something else that's kind of important, we silenced 2 dark mages that have sleep staffs. This is not just to make sure that they don't use it against us, because we don't really care. Like, we could just deploy some kind of decoy and be fine. But we want to capture them and have their sleeps so we can use them in the future chapters. It's pretty powerful. We use a couple of warps to get them, which shows just how much it's worth. Sleep reduces enemy stats to 0 and makes them easy to kill or capture. And that's going to be very valuable in the upcoming chapters.
Yeah, we will have enough uses to just kind of piss them away on enemies, so that's really fun. Last 2 things we have to do in this chapter. First, we have to make sure that we take all of Saias' items, because he starts off with a Warp Staff, a Silent Staff, and a Door Key, and he leaves at the end without giving us any advance notice, so we don't want him to take off with those items. And at the very end of the chapter, after Leif seizes, Saias gives Leif the Blaggi Sword, which is a weapon that's useful in the upcoming chapters. So that's chapter 23, completed in 2 turns. We'll see you next time.
See ya.